The best way to shut down a narcissist is not by outsmarting them, proving them wrong, or exposing their behavior. That's what they expect. That's what they want. Narcissists don't operate on logic. They operate on reaction. Your emotion is their fuel, and every time you engage emotionally, you hand them control. They provoke to feel powerful. They interrupt to feel superior. They twist words to keep you off balance. If you try to explain yourself, they move the goalposts. If you defend yourself, they attack harder. This is why arguing with a narcissist feels exhausting. You're playing a game designed for you to lose. The moment things change is the moment you stop reacting. Calm is the one thing a narcissist cannot manipulate. When you speak slowly, when your tone stays steady, when your face shows nothing extra, the dynamic shifts. You are no longer feeding the cycle. You are no longer entertaining the performance. Calm doesn't escalate, and escalation is what they depend on. Boundaries matter more than explanation. You don't need to convince a narcissist to understand you. They already understand, you just don't benefit from that understanding. What works is clear, simple boundaries stated once and enforced consistently. Not emotionally, not dramatically, just firmly. I'm not discussing this. This conversation is over. I'm stepping away now. No justification, no long speeches, no second chances in the same moment. Boundaries lose power when they turn into debates. Silence is another powerful tool. Silence after manipulation creates discomfort for someone who needs control. When you don't respond immediately, when you don't chase resolution, when you don't fill the space with explanations, you reclaim authority. Silence communicates confidence. It says, I don't need your approval to be stable. This doesn't mean disappearing in fear. It means disengaging with intention. You choose when and how to respond. If at all, that choice alone disrupts their strategy. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to win. Narcissists turn everything into competition. The truth is, winning an argument still keeps you trapped in the interaction. The real win is emotional distance. The real victory is no longer needing the outcome they control. You shut down a narcissist by becoming predictable in your calm and unreachable emotionally. Consistency is what finally ends the cycle. Every time you react the same way, steady, brief, boundaried, they lose leverage. Not immediately, but eventually. They may escalate at first. That's normal. It's the last attempt to regain control. Stay consistent. Don't explain more. Don't soften the boundary. Don't reward escalation with attention. The goal isn't to change them. It's to protect yourself. When your energy is no longer available for manipulation, when your words are few and your boundaries are firm, the power dynamic collapses. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. And that quiet, that calm, controlled, self-respecting quiet, is the best way to shut them down. Narcissists feed on reaction, not truth, because their sense of power does not come from being right, but from controlling emotional responses. Truth is irrelevant to someone whose primary goal is dominance, validation, and attention. They are not listening to understand or resolve, they are watching for impact. Every raised voice, defensive explanation, or emotional outburst confirms that they still have influence. Reaction tells them they matter. Truth, on the other hand, threatens their illusion of control. When you speak truth to a narcissist, it often goes nowhere. Facts are ignored, twisted, minimized, or redirected. Not because the truth is unclear, but because accepting it would require accountability. Accountability destabilizes the image they are protecting. So instead of engaging honestly, they provoke emotionally. They interrupt, mock, gaslight, or escalate not to clarify the situation, but to shift attention away from the truth and toward your reaction. This is why conversations with narcissists feel circular and draining. You explain calmly, they deflect. You provide evidence, they change the subject. You point out inconsistency, they attack your tone. The goalposts move constantly because the goal was never resolution. The goal was engagement. As long as you stay emotionally invested, they stay in control. Reaction is valuable to them because it reassures them of relevance. Anger proves they can affect you. Defensiveness proves they can destabilize you. Over-explaining proves they can keep you chasing validation. Even tears can be interpreted as power. Any emotional response becomes confirmation that they still matter in the interaction. Silence, calm, and detachment are far more threatening than confrontation. Truth requires mutual respect to be effective. It requires a willingness to listen, reflect, and possibly change. Narcissists are often unwilling to do any of those things because their identity depends on being superior, faultless, or admired. Admitting truth feels like losing status. So, instead, they turn conversations into emotional battlegrounds where reaction is the currency. This dynamic explains why logical arguments rarely work. Logic assumes shared reality and good faith. Narcissistic behavior rejects both. They are not confused by the truth. They are uninterested in it. What they want is emotional leverage. Once you understand this, the urge to convince them begins to fade. You realize that clarity won't free you, but emotional disengagement might. Reducing reaction doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means choosing where and with whom you express them. Reacting less in front of a narcissist is not weakness, it is strategy. It removes the reward. When emotional responses stop, the behavior often loses momentum. Without fuel, the fire struggles to continue. This is also why boundaries are more effective than explanations. Explanations invite debate. Boundaries end interaction. A calm boundary deprives them of reaction while still protecting your space. It says enough without feeding the cycle. Consistency strengthens this effect. Each time you respond the same way, steady, brief, unreactive, you teach them that provocation no longer works. Many people stay stuck because they believe truth should matter. They believe that if they just say it the right way, understanding will happen. This belief keeps them engaged far longer than necessary. Letting go of that expectation is difficult but freeing. You stop trying to be heard by someone who only listens for weakness. When reaction is removed, something shifts internally as well. You regain clarity. You stop questioning your reality. You stop replaying conversations in your head. Emotional distance creates perspective. It allows you to see the behavior for what it is, not what you hoped it would become. Narcissists feed on reaction because reaction keeps them central. Truth threatens to take that center away. The moment you stop reacting, you stop participating in the illusion. Control weakens. The dynamic changes, not because they suddenly understand, but because the supply they depended on is no longer available. Calm is the one thing they can't control because calm removes the leverage they rely on. People who manipulate, provoke, or dominate conversations depend on emotional movement. They watch for shifts in tone, changes in expression, and spikes in reaction. Anger, defensiveness, and anxiety are all signals that their influence is working. Calm disrupts that system. It gives them nothing to grab onto, nothing to escalate, nothing to twist. When you remain calm, you step out of the emotional rhythm they are trying to create. Manipulative individuals often set the pace of an interaction by speeding it up, raising intensity, or introducing confusion. Calm slows everything down. It refuses to match their energy. This mismatch creates discomfort for someone who needs control because control requires predictability. Calm is steady, and steady is hard to dominate. Calm also communicates self-trust. You don't rush to explain yourself. You don't scramble to be understood. You don't feel the need to correct every accusation. That composure sends a powerful message. You are grounded in your reality. When someone can't shake your emotional stability, their usual tactics lose effectiveness. Another reason calm is so powerful is that it limits distortion. High emotion creates noise. It leads to over-explaining, defensiveness, and reactive statements that can be misused later. Calm keeps your words few and intentional. Fewer words mean fewer openings. Each sentence is deliberate. That precision protects you. Calm also makes boundaries stronger. Boundaries delivered with anger can be dismissed as overreaction. Boundaries delivered calmly feel final. There's no emotional hook to argue against. Calm boundaries don't invite debate. They communicate decision. This clarity often frustrates those who expect emotional chaos to keep the interaction alive. People who rely on control often attempt to provoke calm individuals even more. They escalate when their usual strategies fail. This is not a sign that calm isn't working, it's evidence that it is. Escalation is often a last attempt to regain influence. Staying calm through that phase is what breaks the pattern. Consistency matters more than intensity. Calm also shifts the power dynamic internally. When you regulate your emotions, you remain present in your body. You think more clearly. You notice patterns instead of reacting to moments. This awareness makes it easier to disengage when necessary and to respond instead of react. Control begins to move back to you. There is also a quiet authority in calm. It doesn't demand attention, yet it commands it. Others may speak louder or more aggressively, but calm holds the room. It creates contrast. That contrast highlights instability without you pointing it out. You don't have to expose behavior. Calm allows it to reveal itself. Remaining calm does not mean tolerating disrespect. It means choosing not to mirror it. Calm can coexist with firmness. You can say no calmly. You can walk away calmly. You can enforce consequences calmly. This combination is difficult to manipulate because it offers no emotional payoff. Many people mistake calm for passivity, but calm is active control. It requires awareness, restraint, and confidence. It is a deliberate choice to protect your energy and clarity. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about deciding where that emotion belongs. Calm keeps your power intact. When you stop reacting emotionally, you stop being predictable. Predictability is essential for control. Calm introduces uncertainty for those who rely on emotional patterns. They can no longer anticipate your moves. That unpredictability weakens their influence. Calm cannot be forced, coerced, or argued out of you. It comes from within, and because it doesn't depend on the other person's behavior, it remains outside their reach. That is why calm is the one thing they can't control. Boundaries work better than arguments because arguments keep you engaged in a battle that was never meant to be resolved. When you argue, you stay inside the conversation trying to prove, explain, or defend. That effort gives the other person continued access to your time, energy, and emotions. Boundaries, on the other hand, change the structure of the interaction entirely. They don't aim to convince, they define limits. Arguments assume mutual respect and a shared goal of understanding. Boundaries assume responsibility for your own well-being. When respect is absent, arguing becomes ineffective. Words are twisted, points are ignored, and the conversation circles endlessly. Boundaries stop the cycle by removing participation instead of increasing effort. They shift focus from being understood to being protected. A boundary is simple, clear, and brief. It doesn't require persuasion. It doesn't rely on the other person's agreement. This is why it works. Boundaries don't ask for permission. They communicate a decision. When you argue, you give the impression that the outcome is still negotiable. When you set a boundary, you make the outcome clear. Many people avoid boundaries because they fear conflict or rejection. They believe that if they explain themselves well enough, the other person will finally understand and change. This belief keeps them stuck in conversations that drain them. Boundaries remove that burden. You don't need someone to understand your limit for it to exist. You only need to enforce it. Arguments also invite escalation. Each side becomes more invested in winning, not resolving. Emotions rise. Words become sharper. The original issue gets buried under tone and defensiveness. Boundaries de-escalate by ending the exchange or redirecting it. They reduce emotional noise and restore clarity. Another reason boundaries work better is that they reveal patterns. When you argue, behavior repeats. When you set boundaries, reactions change. Some people respect the limit. Others push harder. That response gives you valuable information. You learn who can engage respectfully and who cannot. Arguments hide this information by keeping you focused on the content instead of the behavior. Boundaries also protect your credibility. Repeated arguments weaken your position because they suggest inconsistency. You say something matters, but you continue to engage when it's violated. Boundaries backed by action build trust in yourself. Each time you enforce a limit, you reinforce your self-respect. Others begin to understand that your words are followed by action. Setting boundaries calmly is especially effective. Calm boundaries don't provoke defensiveness or invite counterarguments. They feel firm and final. They communicate confidence without aggression. This combination is difficult to challenge because there's nothing to argue with. The boundary stands on its own. Boundaries also conserve energy. Arguments drain mental and emotional resources. They keep you rehearsing conversations, replaying moments, and anticipating responses. Boundaries simplify interactions. You know what you will tolerate and what you won't. That clarity reduces stress and increases emotional stability. It's important to understand that boundaries are not about controlling others, they are about controlling your response. You can't make someone behave differently, but you can decide how close they get, how long you engage, and what access they have to you. That control is where real power lies. Over time, boundaries reshape relationships. Some relationships improve because expectations become clear. Others fade because they depended on access to your unguarded energy. Both outcomes are forms of growth. Boundaries reveal what is sustainable. Arguments keep you explaining. Boundaries keep you safe. One seeks validation. The other establishes self-respect. When you stop arguing and start setting limits, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer trying to win a conversation. You're choosing how much of yourself you're willing to give. Silence is not weakness, it's strategy. Because silence removes you from the emotional battlefield without surrendering your power. Weakness seeks approval, reassurance, or reaction. Silence seeks none of that. It is a deliberate choice to stop feeding dynamics that thrive on engagement. When used intentionally, silence communicates control, clarity, and confidence in a way that words often cannot. Many people speak to defend themselves, to explain, or to correct misunderstandings. In healthy conversations, that can be useful. But in manipulative or hostile interactions, speaking often becomes a trap. Every word is an opportunity to be interrupted, twisted, or used against you. Silence closes that door. It limits exposure. It protects your energy. It signals that you are no longer available for emotional tug-of-war. Silence also disrupts expectations. People who rely on dominance or manipulation expect reaction. They anticipate anger, defensiveness, or over-explaining. Silence breaks that pattern. It creates uncertainty. Without your response, they lose their sense of direction. This loss of predictability weakens their influence, because control depends on knowing how you'll react. Strategic silence doesn't mean avoidance or fear. It means choosing the right moment to disengage. You are not ignoring reality. You are refusing to participate in distortion. Silence buys you time. It gives you space to think, regulate, and decide your next move without pressure. That space is powerful. Silence also speaks volumes. It communicates boundaries without debate. It says, I'm not engaging with this without escalating the situation. Words often invite argument. Silence does not. There's nothing to counter, nothing to twist. This makes silence especially effective when conversations become circular or hostile. Another reason silence is strategic is that it allows behavior to reveal itself. When you stop reacting, the other person often fills the gap. Their tone, persistence, or escalation becomes more visible. You don't have to point out the problem. It shows itself. Silence creates contrast. It highlights instability by remaining steady. Silence also preserves dignity. When emotions run high, people say things they later regret. Choosing silence protects you from that. It keeps your integrity intact. You don't lower yourself to match energy that doesn't serve you. This self-respect is often felt even if it's not acknowledged. There is also a strength in not needing the last word. Many conflicts continue simply because someone feels compelled to respond. Silence breaks that loop. It ends the exchange without declaring victory or defeat. That quiet ending is often more powerful than any argument could be. Silence works best when paired with consistency. One moment of silence, followed by emotional engagement, later sends mixed signals. Consistent silence in response to the same behavior teaches others that provocation no longer works. Over time, the behavior either changes or the interaction fades. Both outcomes protect you. It's important to note that silence is not suppression. You still process your feelings. You just don't process them in front of someone who benefits from your reaction. You choose safer spaces for expression. This distinction keeps silence healthy rather than harmful. Silence also returns control to you. When you stop reacting, you decide when and if communication resumes. You move from being pulled into conversations to choosing them. That choice shifts the power dynamic. You're no longer responding, you're directing. Strategic silence is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't seek attention. It simply withdraws energy from where it's being drained. And in doing so, it restores balance. Silence is not absence. It's presence without participation. It's awareness without reaction. It's strength without noise. And when used intentionally, it becomes one of the most effective strategies for protecting your peace and reclaiming your power. You don't need to win. You need to exit, because not every situation is meant to be conquered or resolved through persistence. Some interactions are designed to keep you trapped, not challenged. When the goal of the other person is control rather than understanding, winning becomes an illusion. The moment you accept that, The urge to prove yourself begins to fade and clarity replaces exhaustion. Winning implies a fair game. It assumes shared rules, mutual respect, and an endpoint where truth matters. In many toxic or manipulative dynamics, none of that exists. The rules change constantly. Logic is ignored. Progress is reversed. You may win 1 point, only to be dragged into another argument moments later. The victory never lasts, because the conflict itself is the objective. Exiting is the only move that actually ends the cycle. People often stay because they believe leaving means losing. They confuse disengagement with defeat. In reality, continuing to engage when the outcome is fixed is the real loss. Time, energy, and emotional stability are quietly drained while nothing improves. Exiting is not surrender, it's discernment. It's recognizing when effort no longer produces growth. The need to win is often tied to ego or hope. Ego wants validation. Hope wants change. Both can keep you invested far longer than necessary. But validation from someone who thrives on conflict never satisfies. And change cannot be forced on someone who benefits from dysfunction. Exiting protects you from both traps. There is also a false belief that leaving means silence forever or cutting all ties immediately. Exit doesn't always mean disappearance. It means reducing engagement, shortening responses, and refusing to participate in emotional escalation. It means stepping back enough to regain perspective and peace. The form of exit may vary, but the intention is the same: reclaim control. Exiting requires emotional maturity. It means tolerating the discomfort of unresolved narratives. There may be no apology, no understanding, no closure. Waiting for those things can keep you stuck indefinitely. Closure is often something you give yourself when you decide that your well-being matters more than being understood. Another reason exiting is powerful is that it shifts the focus from the other person to yourself. Winning keeps your attention outward. Exiting turns it inward. You begin to ask better questions. What am I tolerating? What does this cost me? What do I need to feel safe and stable? These questions lead to growth, not stagnation. Exiting also breaks patterns. Repeated arguments reinforce familiar roles. One person provokes, the other reacts. When you exit, the pattern loses its structure. The script fails. Even if the other person doesn't change, you do. That change is significant. It alters future interactions and raises your standard for engagement. It's important to understand that exiting doesn't require permission. You don't need agreement to step away. You don't need to convince anyone that your reasons are valid. The decision is yours. Waiting for approval keeps you tied to the very dynamic you're trying to escape. Choosing to exit is an act of self-respect. It says that your peace is not negotiable and your energy is not endless. It acknowledges that some doors close not because you failed, but because staying would cost too much. You don't need the last word to move forward. You don't need to be right to be free. Sometimes the strongest move is to stop playing entirely. When you exit, you reclaim your time, your clarity, and your emotional independence. And that freedom is worth far more than any argument you could ever win. Consistency is what finally shuts them down because manipulation depends on unpredictability. When someone is testing boundaries, provoking reactions, or seeking control, they watch closely for variation. They look for moments of weakness, emotional fatigue, or inconsistency they can exploit. A single exception can reopen the door. Consistency closes it. Inconsistent responses send mixed signals. One day you stay calm, the next day you react. One moment you set a boundary, the next you explain it away. This inconsistency teaches the other person that persistence works. They learn that if they push long enough or escalate hard enough, they will eventually get a reaction. Consistency removes that reward. Consistency also builds credibility. When your behavior aligns with your words every time, your boundaries become real. You don't need to restate them or defend them. They are understood through repetition. Over time, others stop testing what no longer moves. People who rely on manipulation often escalate when their usual tactics fail. They may increase pressure, change strategies, or attempt emotional guilt. This phase can feel uncomfortable and make you question whether consistency is working. It is. Escalation is often the final attempt to regain control. Staying consistent through this phase is what breaks the pattern. Consistency is not about intensity, it's about reliability. You don't need dramatic responses or harsh consequences. You need the same calm, firm response every time. Predictability in your behavior creates uncertainty. For those who rely on emotional chaos, they no longer know how to provoke you because the outcome never changes. Another reason consistency is effective is that it shifts responsibility. You stop managing the other person's emotions and start managing your own actions. This internal focus strengthens self-trust. Each time you respond consistently, you reinforce your ability to protect yourself. That reinforcement builds confidence and reduces anxiety. Consistency also clarifies relationships. Some people adapt when they realize boundaries are real. Others disengage when they realize access is limited. Both outcomes provide clarity. You no longer have to guess who respects you. Their response to consistency tells you everything. Inconsistent boundaries invite negotiation. Consistent boundaries end it. When you always follow through, there's nothing left to argue about. The boundary is no longer a suggestion, it's a standard. Standards don't require explanation. Consistency also prevents emotional burnout. Reacting differently each time requires constant emotional effort. Consistency simplifies your responses. You know what you'll say. You know when you'll disengage. This predictability reduces mental fatigue and increases emotional stability. It's important to understand that consistency is not about controlling others. It's about controlling access. You decide how much time, energy, and attention someone receives. That decision remains steady regardless of their behavior. This steadiness removes the incentive to manipulate. Over time, consistent behavior changes the dynamic. The interaction becomes less dramatic, less charged, or stops altogether, not because you demanded change, but because the environment no longer supports manipulation. Without emotional payoff, the behavior loses purpose. Consistency also strengthens your identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who follows through, who respects their own limits, and who doesn't abandon themselves under pressure. This self-respect influences all areas of your life. Not just difficult relationships. Shutting down unhealthy dynamics doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens through repeated, aligned actions. Each calm response, each enforced boundary, each decision to disengage adds weight. Eventually, the pattern collapses under its own weight. Consistency doesn't argue, it doesn't convince, it simply stands firm. And that firmness is what finally shuts them down.